Hi, well, I'm Nadav Ben-Chanoch. I usually just go by Nadav. I have a difficult last name, so I always tell people I'm like Beyonce when they ask what my last name is. What first name's plenty. I'm the chief of staff of Pareto Holdings, which is sort of like the brainchild of John Oringer, who's the founder of Shutterstock, and Ed Lando, who's the founder of one of the founders of Misfits Market and a company called Goody and a whole bunch of other things. And Essentially, we are trying to build tech companies in Miami. So there's sort of two arms to the business of what we do there. And I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more
Yeah.
during this conversation, but just a quick overview. So we make investments on one side, and we also build and incubate our own companies, kind of from ideation all the way through growth. Happy to be here and tell you more about Pareto and about myself, and dive in.
That's awesome, Nadav. I can relate regarding the name as well. My first name the same way, last name super long, complicated. So I always just call me John, and that's it. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it. The same. So I can relate. Well, that's super exciting. With the Pareto Holdings and everything goes on here in South Florida as well. I'm based in Fort Lauderdale too. So before we talk about your current role, current organization, give us a thumbnail version of your career to date.
My career. Okay. Oh, my career has been sort of a winding road, I guess, in a way. A little bit of background about me. So I'm originally Israeli. I was born in Israel. I moved to Miami when I was a kid, in fifth grade. Grew up in Miami. Did my undergrad at University of Florida in Gainesville. I was actually a chemical engineering major, randomly enough. Came back to Miami, worked at a small shop doing air pollution control systems for a little bit. Got kind of bored there and decided to take a year off to travel the world. So I did that, came back, decided to go to law school. That's how I ended up in New York, went to Cardozo, and from there I spent 4 years at a big firm in the city called Kirkland, Ellis, where I did private equity M&A deals, which is somewhat of a brutal life, but I think I learned a lot there. Ultimately decided to leave, started a company called Rowgatta with one of my buddies from Kirkland, which was sort of a hybrid tech retail health and wellness brand. So we actually did build a prototype of a Peloton style digital rowing machine. So we actually had the original, the guy that designed the Peloton bike also designed our initial machine. We built it in Taiwan. We had a small tech team in Brooklyn building out our software. Sort of like a long story of what happened there, but we also opened up a physical location, a studio right by Union Square on 14th Street. For the New Yorkers, it's right across the street from the big party city, where everybody seems to know the big party city on 14th Street. So we were right across the street. Beautiful facility. We had 2 floors. We had everything. The place was doing really well. Only downside is we opened in September of 2019. And of course, 6 months later, COVID hit and kind of shut us down. We were actually raising money in February of 2020. And, we sort of thought that this was our big, studio was doing well. We're moving forward on the digital side. So we thought this was going to be like our big payday around the corner. And then March 13th, 2020, basically overnight, everything disappeared. We shut down the studio, which never reopened. And all the money kind of dried up. So I came back to Miami, and I was sort of trying to decide what I wanted to do next. I had a few ideas that I was considering pursuing, one kind of more so than the others. And then I heard about this position with John and Ed at Pareto, that they were looking for a chief of staff to help them kind of run the operation. So I thought to myself, this is something I could do. So I applied. I'm also a part of what's called the Miami Tech Life Group. It's an informal group where we do just kind of like different activities. So there's like Miami Tech Life Cycling, which I'm involved with. I think it's called Miami Tech Life Riders. There's like a foodie one and social one and whatever one. So typically on Saturday mornings we do a bike ride with the Miami Tech crew. That's actually how I heard about the Pareto job in the first place. And John also occasionally rides with that crew. And we actually had a bunch of us were doing this annual Dolphins Cancer Challenge. It's a 100-mile bike ride in South Florida to raise money for cancer research. So I had signed up for that. A bunch of us had, including John. So after I applied, I had like a quick phone, like a Zoom interview with John and Ed, where we chatted a little bit. And then John was like, hey, aren't you doing, we had a practice bicycle ride, like an organized practice ride that Saturday, like a 60-mile ride out of South Beach. He's like, aren't you going to be there on Saturday? Let's just chat then. So I was like, okay, great. So I show up on Saturday with my little bicycle, and I'm kind of like riding. I see John. I roll up next to him on my bike. I'm like, hey, man. He's like, oh, hey, how's it going? I was like, oh, great. So we just chit chatted, and then I started on Monday. That was pretty much it. And I've been doing that for the last few months now.
Wow, that's super cool. Love the background and, relate on so many levels. Having been an entrepreneur, startup founder of many startups of my own, most of which I successfully failed.
Yeah.
So, with one decent outcome, but overall, I love the approach to, new opportunities, getting very creative, which is, how a lot of founders are. And I wanted to ask you about how you get involved with the current organization, but you're going to beat me to the punch with that story, which is very interesting. With South Florida tech scene, been on the rise pretty extensively, especially the last couple of years. With the mayor doing a lot of great stuff, a lot of funds moving down here. Tell me a little bit more about some of the trends you're seeing in this space, and in tech startups, in investment opportunities. What have you observed lately in terms of South Florida market in general?
Sure. So on the investing side, we see things kind of all over, but we've also seen and have made, a bunch of investments in South Florida companies. I think it also used to be right that Florida was just healthcare as far as tech goes, and maybe some other kind of random ideas. And I don't think that's the case so much anymore. We recently invested in a company here that's like in the education space. What are some other ones? Some healthcare, you still see a fair amount, but it's just like a much more diverse, both in terms of kind of the players, right, and also the industries that people are working in. So I think it's looking a lot more like now when we look at deals, whether it comes from South Florida or San Francisco or New York or whatever, if I just kind of, if you just removed where the email came from, you wouldn't really be able to tell anymore, which I think is super exciting. And there's a lot of new things popping up all around South Florida. I think the biggest thing is that, the mayor has done a great job, and a lot of capital has been flooding South Florida. And now I think that, talent follows the money, right? So I think we're going to have, and I think recently I saw there was an article about this, how during the last, whatever it is, 6 months or a year, I think South Florida was like the biggest importer of talent, whereas it used to be just like a huge net exporter of talent. Where places like San Francisco and New York are losing talent because people are coming to South Florida, which I think is great, because I think the hardest part for us in our portfolio companies is really just sourcing talent, right? Like, we're growing, we have capital, but engineers don't grow on trees, and founders definitely don't grow on trees. And a big part of what we do is we have certain ideas and models that we'd like to get off the ground out of South Florida again, and we'll go out, we'll come up with sort of like a high level plan of what we want to do, and then we go out and source an operator essentially to run it, right? Whether that's a CEO or a CTO, depending on how technical the initial product is. And that's really challenging, and that typically is the bottleneck, right, that keeps us from just launching, just writing checks left and right, essentially. So I think now seeing more and more people coming to South Florida, and we've even had people from other places that we brought on to run our companies, and they're moving. I have somebody I know from my network, actually a friend of mine, who is launching a new telemedicine company for Pareto, based out of New York, and he's looking at houses in Miami now, which is awesome. We had another founder who's actually living abroad now, and he's looking to make a move to Miami. So we're doing our best, at least, to build companies here in Miami and attract talent. And the last thing I'll say about that, just in general, the mayor also speaks a lot about how this is not a moment, it's a movement. And I think that we've gotten to the point now, right, where like there's money here. We've had kind of all the hype, right? We saw Miami Tech Week with everybody posting all this craziness on social media, et cetera. But I think ultimately what's going to determine whether there's long-term success in Miami as a tech hub is whether you have successful companies, right? Like, that's really the only thing that's going to have a lasting impact. So you need your, Googles and Facebooks and whatever it is out of South Florida. And that's very much what we're also focused on at Pareto. Like, you're not really going to see us, we're not throwing huge events, and you're not going to see us posting videos on social media of us, jumping up and down on boats or whatever it is. We're sort of heads down building, and we really want to create some huge and successful companies in South Florida and bring talent to operate there.
Yeah, I love that. And I bet we can talk about this particular area for the rest of the episode, because myself, having been an entrepreneur now on the investment side as an angel investor and member of a few syndicates, it's always a challenge, especially when investing into companies here in South Florida, for them to be able to recruit and staff and find the right talent. That's the number one challenge, is, you've observed as well. And it's exciting to hear a lot of that influx of different companies moving down here and bringing that talent with them. And on top of it all, the different accelerators that have been popping up, the incubators as well, that really fosters that, almost that culture, that environment for founders to be successful, with resources and, with other connections and whatever the case may be. Tell us a little bit more about the kind of that accelerator that you guys have launched. What's the mission there? What's the vision there?
Sure. I mean, the mission is pretty simple. We want to launch big world-changing companies. We want to do it out of Miami. I think we're also uniquely positioned in the sense that we're not a fund. Pareto is not a fund. We don't have LPs, right? Like the money is basically just John and Ed pooled their resources and want to do this together. And they're very much hands-on and involved as well. I mean, they do this not because they need the money, right? They do it because they enjoy it and they want to make an impact. And it's been really exciting for me to sort of be like the third musketeer now, or kind of running along with this show. So that's it, really, just creating big world-changing companies. We'd like to make a positive impact. Of course, it's not really just about the money for us. But we're pretty industry agnostic. I mean, there's certain areas that we like healthcare, education. I mean, we have some stuff in the works on the fintech side, which is as everybody I guess knows now, is a very hot industry at the moment. But it's really the fun of coming up with an idea, or having someone come up to us with an idea and really figuring out how to bring that to life and turn it into something really big and exciting. So we're hoping that we're going to have some massive companies in Miami, and really kind of growing the ecosystem. Everybody talks about growing the ecosystem, right? Which one thing that I think is very unique and cool about doing this in Miami in this moment is that, unlike, I can't really speak to the Bay Area so much because I haven't spent a lot of time there, but New York is that it feels very collegial. People like to throw that word around as well, but it really is, right? Everybody's focused on kind of growing the Miami ecosystem. It's not like, okay, no one feels like there's a zero-sum game here, right? Where like every engineer or every dollar that goes to somebody else is an engineer or dollar that I'm not getting. It's very much, you can get in front of people that in New York and San Francisco you would never be able to get in front of, right? Like I can text the mayor right now and like get connected to whomever it is that I want to connect with. You go to these Miami tech events and you're talking to like huge names here, right? Like people the famous people, right, in the tech world. And you could just talk to them, right? Which I think doing that in New York or anywhere else is really difficult, where it's much more kind of, I don't want to say clicky, right? But it's like, okay, here's like, you belong in this group and like, you're like at this tier kind of, whereas here, everybody's working together to grow the pie. And I think it's just a very unique time to be involved in that. That's something I'm super grateful for.
Yeah, that's for sure. Having been on the angel investing side and on the entrepreneurial side, I definitely relate to kind of where you're talking about the different clicks and different layers in other markets. I've been there myself, and I think in South Florida, it's very unique in that sense. So that's super exciting in terms of that particular growth. The other side I want to discuss with you is kind of the role of the chief of staff as well. I talked to, a lot of executives at many different companies, recently hosted a chief of staff at Google, chief of staff at LogMe, and different size of organizations. Tell us your kind of, how do you view the role of the chief of staff? What falls under the purview for that particular area of responsibility? And more importantly, also, you told us a story of how you got into that particular role, but what are the typical career paths? Someone getting into chief of staff, what's beyond that? Just talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. That's a great question. I think that my role is probably a little bit different from some of the other chiefs of staff you had on
Which
before.
I
In
hear
this,
that a lot, by the way. Everyone has their own version,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
very
because
interesting.
yeah, and actually I have a lot of people that reach out to me now, especially lawyers who want to get out of law, right? And I guess they see that I'm doing this, and everyone's sort of like, "How did you make the transition?" And truthfully, I just kind of fell into it, right? It wasn't something I ever thought about or planned. I never thought to myself like, "Oh, I want to be a chief of staff somewhere." It was never the thought never crossed my mind before. Um, the reason I think mine is slightly different, I'm sure everybody feels like they're the unique snowflake of the chiefs of staff, right? Is that so for the most part, it's really the three of us at Pareto now, and we have our operators at the various companies. We actually brought on a couple of interns recently, one of which is a University of Miami student. They've been amazing and super helpful. But other than that, we mostly outsource a lot of the support. So I don't really have much of a staff to chief right now. I'm sort of just chiefing myself, I guess. So that might be a little bit different than some of these other roles. Um, but the way I mean, I can tell you what I do, right? What my day to day look like. So a big part of what I do is kind of manage our deal flow. So we see a ton of deal flow. We primarily invest early stage, but we'll invest in growth stages as well. And we really invest more like angels than as a fund, because like I said, we don't have LPs, right? So we'll write a lot of smaller checks usually, and the larger checks we reserve for kind of our own incubations where we're doing a full pre-seed and potential follow-up rounds, et cetera. So I mean, I probably look at easy 25 deals a week, maybe sometimes 30 deals a week, where I just have like short calls with people and take it back to the team and sort of decide where we want to invest. But we write on average multiple checks a week. So I'd say 2, 3 checks on average probably per week. So that's a lot of deal flow right there. So that takes up a good amount of my time. And then the more interesting and exciting part, I think, is really supporting our portfolio companies. So I work closely with all our CEOs or CTOs or whoever it is leading the charge, and supporting them in whatever it is they need to move forward, right? Like what we're trying to do is, besides fund these companies, is also kind of remove obstacles, right? What we call giving them unfair advantages, so that they can focus on building product, finding product market fit, go to market, whatever it is that they're good at and they need to do. So hiring, for example, is something that we're very active in, and something that I help out with a lot for our founders. And I have my intern spend a lot of time on this as well. Is like I said, finding engineers, finding talent is very difficult. So that in itself can be a full-time job. And if we have right now, I think I don't know, maybe coming up on 10 companies in the portfolio or something like that, and a lot of them are hiring. That's pretty time consuming. So we focus a lot on that. And it really depends on kind of any given operator, right? Like we have some technical operators that are amazing at building product, but have never raised money before, for example, right? So once we're ready to raise the seed round or whatever round we're going to go raise, me and the team will work closely with them, to even like figure out, like some of them have never put together a deck before. So how do you position yourself, right? How do you pitch investors? We'll do pitch practice and give them notes and practice. So by the time that they are ready to go, pitch to whoever it is we put them in front of, it's a little more refined, I guess, than a little more polished than where we started. What else? I'd say those are sort of like the two main areas that I focus on are deal flow and supporting our companies, and hiring. And then the other thing is sourcing founders, essentially, right? Like we'll have brainstorming sessions. We're like, hey, we love this idea. We really want to launch a company here. We're ready to fund it, right? Like capital is not an issue. But the three of us are not going to run all these companies on our own. So it's like, okay, where do we find someone that can actually execute on this? Which is also why we actually just had our very first Pareto fellowship was a couple of weeks ago now, where we essentially the purpose was to find operators, and launch companies. So we ended up having over 600 applicants. We chose 17 fellows. We already funded one pair. We have another one that we're about to fund. Actually, we have a few more already that we're sort of figuring out kind of like the best way moving forward. They're just kind of like finalizing, what the idea is and how they want to move forward with it. But we're going to write several checks coming out of the fellowship, which is super exciting for us, right? Because we want to build a portfolio, we want to support these people, and we really want to put them in a position to succeed. Um, so I guess I digress a little bit, but that's essentially my day to day, which is super unpredictable at times, but also very, very exciting. And as far as what any other chief of staff does, I have no idea, to be honest. Never thought about it, never looked into it. But I'd be curious to hear about, whether I'm getting a good deal here or not, right, with my responsibilities, or whether I'm getting the short end of the stick somehow.
No, I think you are, and there are a lot of similarities because I talked to quite a few chief of staffs as other different size organizations, and it all boils down just being kind of that right hand man or right hand woman to the CEO, whoever is in charge, and almost being that almost head of all the projects, like a project management lead, where you take on these very mission critical projects, take a lead on that, assemble the teams, and basically run those as mini companies almost.
Yep.
So that seems like the trend that I'm hearing also with all the different initiatives that you're involved with, which is, I'm pretty sure every day is very unique, very different, which is very exciting. When we talk about kind of the whole concept of future of work that's really been on the rise, especially the last couple of years coming out of pandemic, the emergence of the contingent workers, gig workers, freelancers, contractors, and so forth. What are your thoughts overall on the future of work? Where do you see this trend going, especially when you observe such a influx of the different companies growing here in South Florida? What challenges do you see from that perspective? Just talk to us a little bit from that standpoint.
Sure. I think a lot of it is just kind of industry dependent, and and sort of who's running the show, right? I think that there's going to be law firms and banks, for example, in New York, are probably going to make everybody come back at some point, right? Because they want to be in the office, they want to be wearing their suits and ties, and they want to get back to whatever it is they were doing before, sort of more like an old school mentality. I think for a lot of the rest of the world, I think remote work is here to stay. Even now, we have companies, right, based out of Miami, but we have certain people that are working for them all over the place. We're just talking to someone who works in Indonesia and bringing him on board. So for example, happen to be in New York today. I mean, I live in Miami. I just happen to be in New York today doing this podcast, and it doesn't really make a difference, right? Our team's kind of traveling and scattered around, and I think that's just the reality. And I think that's great. I think it's also you save a lot of time this way, right? Like, why do I need to sit through an hour of traffic, for example, every day to get to the office, and then an hour back, where you take those 2 hours and I could be working or doing something else, right? That's a lot of time that's otherwise being wasted. So I very much think that this remote thing is here to stay, and on the sort of on the specifically tech side, we get pitched a lot, all sorts of ideas around kind of like the new, right, like work remote world that we're living in, and how to capitalize on it, or what kind of technical solutions we can build to make it easier. Because I think, for example, Zoom, right? I think we're all pretty sick of Zoom at this point. I have Zooms all day, and frankly, oftentimes now I just tell people, like, hey, let's just do a call. I'm going to take the dog for a walk around the block or something, right, and do a call, because sitting in front of the screen all day is it's exhausting. So I think we're going to see some changes in sort of like getting into a groove of things that people are comfortable with, aside from just sitting in front of their computer on Zoom all day. I don't know what exactly that's going to look like. Maybe it's something that we come up with ourselves and build a Pareto, who knows? But I am very much a proponent of this sort of like work from wherever, right? Like, let's treat people like adults, so long as they're doing whatever it is they need to do. I don't care whether you're physically in Miami or Alaska or Antarctica, right? It doesn't really make a difference to me.
Right, absolutely. No, I think it's going to be very interesting to observe that trend, especially in the next couple of, quarters in the next year, with coming out of pandemic, a lot of companies figuring out strategies how to structure their operations, whether to, maintain a hybrid model, fully virtual, or bring folks back to, physical locations. I think it's challenging. It's going to be very difficult, but also creates a lot of opportunities for the
Yeah.
workers, for the contractors to explore other opportunities as well. on a global scale, like you were saying, everything being so virtual. So that's
Yeah.
very exciting.
And you can save money on the real estate, right? Take that money and give it back to your employees, right? Give them a budget to go buy. If they want a cool, curved screen in their home office, then let them buy that, right? Still a lot cheaper. And that said, listen, we are planning on opening up an office probably in the fall in Miami. We had actually spoken about doing it sooner, but between COVID and over the summer, people are sort of traveling and all over the place. We figured we'll hold off until the fall, but we've been sort of looking at office space a little bit, and we do plan on opening up a place in Miami, and essentially having, just a space where our operators and whoever can come together and work and build their network, right, and kind of ideate together and support each other, which I think will be a very cool and unique place to be.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's going to be very interesting. On the other spectrum, for startup founders or those looking to, bring their ideas to life, launch their companies, fundraising becomes obviously, for a lot of them, a almost a full-time job, especially during the early stages. I've been there myself. It's, it is difficult, it's challenging, especially if you don't come from that particular background. What are some of the, first-time founder mistakes that you observe, especially when it comes to fundraising, or what are recommendations that you have, especially for the startup founders that you work with as part of your portfolio in terms of fundraising, how to go about, networking, finding the right opportunities? Talk to us a little bit from that standpoint.
Sure. I mean, yeah, listen, and having been on both sides of it now, I think fundraising is the worst, right? Like when you're the one desperate for money,
It's like
and you're just
interviewing for jobs.
yeah, and
It's
you're just
horrible.
begging people, just look at the deck for a second, can I get 2 minutes of your time? Can I buy you a coffee? I mean, listen, I think the number one thing is like tap your network, right? Because if you can get a warm introduction somewhere, your chances of actually having a real presentation with this person are infinitely greater than just cold calling. That said, sometimes you just have to hustle your way through it. I think one of the big mistakes that I've seen, I mean, this is probably a mistake that I made as well with my company, is that you always feel like somehow you need this like perfect product, right? And you need to be like at a certain place to go out and raise money. Otherwise, people aren't going to take you seriously, and you need to like show all this stuff. And that's really not the truth, right? Like when we invest, the two things I really care about is number one is the team, right? And that's even if I didn't know what the idea was or what the company does. I really care about the team, right? Like, do I think that this is like a smart, capable, driven team? And do I think that they're passionate about and invest enough in what they're doing that even if whatever idea, right, even if there's another pandemic or something like a pandemic, right, that totally destroys whatever industry they're in, do I think that this team will still be able to pull it out and pivot, right, and do something else that where I'm willing to gamble on them? That to me is the number one thing. And that has nothing to do with how much traction they have or what their GMV is or anything like that, right? There's no real KPI for that. And then the other thing, of course, is if you can articulate whatever it is, whatever your vision is, in a way that not only explains how you're going to make money here, et cetera, but that gets your audience excited, right? Like I've heard, I hear a ton of pitches, and some of them are very exciting industries, and some are very boring, right? We just had a pitch about kind of like this like legal tech thing, but the founder did an amazing job and put together actually this little video that kind of explains how it all works in a fun way. So you're not just sitting there and it's like, well, like due diligence sucks and like, we can do this, because listen, if you're listening to 25 pitches a week, it's hard to kind of like lose interest, right? So how can you capture my attention and make me want to listen, right? Like instead of having me like falling asleep on Zoom or like looking at my phone or whatever, like pull me in where I'm captivated by whatever it is you're saying. And I think that's something that people don't put enough emphasis on, right? I think they're very eager to go through the deck, which is another thing, by the way, that almost every call when people are like, hey, like, let me run you through the deck. I'm like, listen, I can look through the deck on my own, right? Like, tell me the story. Like, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you working on this? Right? Like, why should I believe that you're the one in whatever it is percentage that's actually going to succeed here, right? I think that's a lot more interesting. So I would say those are probably a couple of key things. Like if you get me excited about whatever it is, and I believe that you're the right person to do this, then everything else does, like, right? Like I don't really care how much traction you have,
Right. Right.
especially early stage, right? Early stage. I mean, the different businesses, it might take a long time before you might be pre-revenue for a long time, right? So you're not going to be able to show me whatever your GMV is for a while, but I might still be able to understand the story and why I think that you can execute on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love some of these frameworks, and it makes sense because, for me, when I evaluate the company's investing, especially like you were saying, pre-revenue, pre-PMF, it's all about the founder as well. It's really trying to understand their background. I love following the digital breadcrumbs of that particular founder. Look at, talk to them about the early days, their college days as well, where did you join the club or did you build a club, or kind of the whole analogy of the cartographer versus the navigator as well. Did you create the maps for others to follow you? So, and at the end of the day, for the founders, just really being a friend versus being a parent. I see a lot of kind of the investors falling into that trap, especially when investing, trying to control everything at the end of the day and guides the founders without letting that be autonomous as they originally set out to be. So that's, interesting frameworks there.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to remember as a founder, right? Where it's like, listen, these like investors and VCs, they're not like some geniuses that are better than you in any way, shape, or form, right? First of all, there's a good chance that whatever it is you're talking about, you know way more about it than what they know, right? So like,
Yeah.
just remember that, and it's not you're not asking them for favors here, right? Like you're essentially like you have a value proposition that you're explaining to them. And if they can't see that, then listen, sometimes maybe you didn't do a great job explaining it. Sometimes maybe your value prop is just not there, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever you're working on is just probably maybe not a great idea.
Or
But
it's
a
not
lot
the
of
right
times,
match as well, right? For
yeah,
them, for particular
exactly,
investors. So
exactly.
it could be that opportunity to continue looking, so that you don't want to, being an investor and founder, you're going to be attached at the hip for the next 10 years. So you definitely don't want to be stuck with somebody that you're not going to enjoy working with. So I
Yeah,
think,
so yeah, someone that believes in you. Listen, there's sometimes times where you just have to take any money, right? Like you're about to run, you can't make payroll, and you need an influx of cash, and you'll take whatever. But those are not as common, right? So it's like find somebody that you want as a partner, someone you feel comfortable with, and just remember that it's all just human beings at the end of the day, right? It's not like these VCs or these, like demigods or whatever that you need to grovel before. They're also just trying to kind of like figure out how to make how to not mess up, usually is probably what they're trying to do.
yeah. Risk avoidance is a big factor. The last portion of each episode, I talk about, the guests' content diets. What do you consume on a daily basis? What are the different sources that you utilize to educate yourself, stay ahead of the curve for self-actualization? Share with us those.
Sure. So these days, I mean, I typically have like a morning routine that I try to protect at all costs. Recently, things have been like super hectic for us, so I'd say I'm a little bit off the bandwagon a little bit, and I haven't had a ton of time to educate myself as much as I would like to. Like to a certain extent, I get a daily education in the sense that I'm looking at so many deals now that I know, I see just kind of everything that's out there. Well, not everything, but a wide range of things that are out there, especially at the early stage side, because we look at deals from all around the world. And like I said, we're industry agnostic. So I'm seeing, like I saw like some like pet food company last week that actually I thought was pretty cool. And then, 20 minutes later, I'm going to call about some, later stage fintech company in Latin America that's raising a huge round or whatnot. So I think that's probably how I stay the most educated these days. I try to also go to, especially in Miami, some of the networking events, just because I do think it's important it's part of building this ecosystem, right? For people to know each other and form real connections outside of Zoom and outside of email. As far as other resources, I recently got on Twitter as part of the job, really. I never really tweeted before, but now I'm on there. So, I got to give the mayor some good content to retweet. So I get some information on there now, and really amongst ourselves, between John, Ed, myself, and some of our operators. I mean, we're always kind of like people are either sending us or we're seeing, whether it's like TechCrunch or PitchBook or whatever it is you see, right? All these raises that we always share with each other. We're like, hey, look, like, this company's doing this. That's actually not that different from what we're doing at this other company. Like, you sort of like see which way the market's going. And right now, the market's really at a place where just you have money flying everywhere. It's actually crazy, some of the, these deals that you see now. But yeah, I don't quite have. To be honest, I don't worry so much about keeping myself appraised of what's happening on the tech world. I'm more worried about just keeping myself mentally sharp. So I'm an early riser. I wake up. I work out every morning. I have like my little athletic greens drink that I do. I have my morning sitting meditation, get my get myself situated, and then hop into the next like 12 hours of tech madness or whatever it is that's coming my way.
Right,
Or
right, right.
podcast sometimes, sometimes I get a break and I do a podcast.
Oh
That's
yeah,
cool.
there you go. Yeah, that's awesome. I love the methodology, kind of the process you built around that. Very similarly, just being disciplined and structured in that way. I think it's very important, especially in the space that we're in, investing entrepreneurial, the tech startups, which pivots and moves by the hour, maybe by the minute at times. So you got to be
Mm.
able to maintain that mental toughness to keep up with all of the change. So that's super exciting.
Yep.
Nadav, I can't thank you enough for your time today. Personally learned quite a bit. What I love doing with all of the guests on the episode is do a follow-up recording in about a year, see how much have changed, transpired, revisit the conversation from a year ago, and see if everything we discussed actually still makes sense. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I'm pretty sure I'm going to see you in some of the networking events here in South Florida. And thanks for everything that you do.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. And listen, next time we talk, hopefully have a big staff. We're looking to bring some people on board probably in-house soon. And we'll see. Most likely, I think what's going to happen is one of these projects of ours, I may just hop back into the driver's seat and run with one. So we'll see, we'll see how long before that happens.
That's awesome. Definitely looking forward to it.
Awesome. Really appreciate the time. And we'll talk again soon then.